Terry Kath, a cornerstone of the seminal band Chicago, met an untimely end on January 23, 1978, due to an unfortunate accident. However, when authorities attempted to attend to his remains, they were confronted with an unexpected and rather peculiar challenge. While Terry Kath might not immediately spring to mind for many in the annals of rock and roll history, this is in no way a reflection of his talent or the profound influence he wielded. His fellow bandmates themselves have often remarked that had he been part of a less prominent ensemble, allowing his exceptional guitar prowess to shine more distinctly, history would undoubtedly have elevated him to the pantheon of true legends. Born on January 31, 1946, in the vibrant city of Chicago, Illinois, Kath's upbringing was marked by a supportive family environment that actively encouraged his burgeoning musical inclinations, providing him with opportunities to explore various instruments. His mother's own passion for the banjo and his brother's rhythmic drumming undoubtedly played a role, inspiring young Terry to follow in their footsteps. Little could he have foreseen the immense significance music would ultimately hold in his life, far exceeding even his own youthful aspirations. By the time he reached the 9th grade, Terry's musical destiny was clear. The guitar was the instrument that captured his soul. Soon after, he was gifted his own guitar and amplifier, setting him on a path of dedicated self-discovery. Drawing inspiration from virtuosos like Johnny Smith and Howard Roberts, Terry largely honed his skills independently, eschewing formal instruction. Yet this was merely the nascent stage of his musical journey. It wasn't for lack of opportunity or access to professional tutelage. Terry did indeed explore lessons with various instructors. However, he soon concluded that a rigid academic approach to music wasn't suited to his spirit, particularly given his singular focus on mastering the foundational chords of rock and roll. Despite finding his true calling, this chosen path was not universally embraced by the significant individuals in Terry's life. Nurtured by a musically inclined household, Terry developed an intense and immediate affinity for rock and jazz, resolutely deciding to dedicate himself to a career in music, regardless of the obstacles. His parents, however, harbored reservations about his ambitious life plan, especially his father, who envisioned a more secure and conventional career for his son. Nevertheless, Terry embarked on his pursuit of stardom, and the decisions he made proved to be remarkably fruitful. Opting for a more strategic approach than forging a path alone, Terry wisely chose to collaborate with fellow aspiring musicians. At the tender age of 17, he joined a semi-professional ensemble named The Mystics, subsequently transitioning through several other groups over the ensuing years. Even then, his distinctive artistic sensibility was evident. Following a brief tenure with Jimmy Rice and the Gentlemen, Terry moved on to another band, Jimmy Ford and the Executives. He was far from a mere contributor. His bandmates increasingly looked to him for creative direction, effectively positioning him as the de facto band leader. Naturally, certain members fostered a deeper connection with him. It was during his time with Jimmy Ford and the Executives that Terry forged some of the most enduring and influential relationships of his life. Initially joining as a bassist, he found himself alongside drummer Danny Serafine and saxophonist Walter Parazida, with whom he quickly developed a strong camaraderie. Regrettably, clouds were gathering on the horizon. Less than a year later, the band decided to amalgamate with another group, Little Artie and the Pharaohs, a development that spelled unfortunate tidings for Terry and his two newfound confidants. Believing their combined talents would be more advantageous without the trio, the new entity unceremoniously dismissed them with a stark pronouncement, "It's just business." While this might have appeared to be a musician's worst nightmare, it would ultimately prove to be a serendipitous turn of events. For countless other artists, such a setback could have signaled the end of their aspirations. Terry, however, possessed an indomitable spirit, and resolve to persevere. His previous band was not the sole entity seeking his unique musical gifts. In 1966, he joined a cover band named The Missing Links. Crucially, he was not alone. He successfully persuaded Danny and Walter to accompany him. Years later, Danny reflected on his friendship with Terry, offering some truly remarkable insights. Terry's friends consistently described him as possessing an innate charisma that captivated them from their initial encounters. While there was an undeniable magnetic quality about him, his depth extended far beyond surface appearances. They also confessed to sensing an underlying intensity within Terry, a certain darkness concealed beneath his typically easygoing demeanor, a darkness that would eventually manifest more prominently. Upon relocating to Los Angeles, the band initially adopted the name Chicago Transit Authority, but were compelled to shorten it to simply Chicago in 1969, following a legal dispute with the actual transportation organization. At this point, their professional journey truly gained momentum. Like any dedicated guitarist, Terry invested considerable thought and effort into the instruments he wielded throughout his career. Although his initial primary guitar was a modest purchase, an $80 Rickenbacker, he eventually transitioned to a Fender Stratocaster as both he and his bandmates achieved greater success. He also made astute business decisions. Within a few years, Terry, alongside several associates and band members of Chicago, became significant investors in a nascent amplifier company known as Pignos. Furthermore, he became deeply involved in the company's operational management. As a testament to his allegiance, one of his guitars eventually bore a collection of 25 Pignos stickers. Concurrently, he explored crafting his own equipment, embarking on some truly unconventional experiments. Through his association with Pignos, Terry was familiar with the company's prototype devices, yet he was not content to rely solely on their innovations. In his leisure time, he devised various mechanisms to enhance his playing, including an electric cocktail mixer, which he attempted to adapt into an automatic guitar picker. His innate inventiveness propelled his music to extraordinary heights. Influenced by his early inspirations, Terry imbued Chicago's initial musical output with a substantial infusion of rock and jazz, a decision that profoundly benefited the band. His bandmates once again looked to him as their creative compass, as his prowess as both a guitarist and vocalist was unparalleled at the time. Under his leadership, the band flourished. Despite the name change, the band released their debut album in 1969 under their original moniker, Chicago Transit Authority. Many have since identified the track Introduction as a quintessential example of Terry's early style, even hailing it as his magnum opus. However, this was not the pinnacle of his achievements. Early on, Terry garnered widespread acclaim for his extraordinary solo capabilities, vividly demonstrated on another track from the album, Freeform Guitar. Declining to utilize any effects pedals, Terry directly connected his guitar to the amplifier and improvised nearly the entire 7-minute piece. The resultant music was so sophisticated that it was not uncommon for classical radio stations to feature the song. Through the band's escalating success, they encountered several prominent figures in the music industry. With the release of their inaugural album, Chicago was experiencing a positive trajectory, but their public profile still required further enhancement. Consequently, as 1969 progressed, they were engaged as opening acts for both Janis Joplin and Jimi Hendrix, who, according to accounts, was already acquainted with the band's signature sound and the man behind it. This connection afforded Terry considerable recognition. According to anecdotal evidence, Chicago's engagement as Hendrix's support act was not their sole encounter with the legendary guitarist. It is reported that while at a nightclub called Whiskey, a Go-Go, the band previously crossed paths with Hendrix, who purportedly told them, your guitarist is better than me." Hendrix's admiration, it is alleged, did not end there. Danny Seraphine's own recollections elevate the Hendrix anecdote even further. He recounts that both Hendrix and drummer Mitch Mitchell expressed profound praise for the band, stating, "You are the best band I've ever heard in my life." These indelible compliments, in Seraphine's words, served as "good for our souls." It is hardly surprising that accolades continued to pour in. A year after their first album, the band unveiled their subsequent project under their new name, though it is now recognized as Chicago 2. This album features their next major hit, 25 or 6-4, which included a guitar solo by Terry that became a crowd favorite during live performances. Understandably, every subsequent album would feature at least one song and one lead vocal performance by him for the remainder of his life. Even in comparison to his peers, Terry's technical skill was self-evident. Terry was not Chicago's sole vocalist, yet even in the early stages, the band frequently entrusted him with lead vocal duties. On Chicago 2, a medley titled "Ballet for a Girl in Buchanan" includes the song "Make Me Smile," on which Terry delivers the lead vocals. Initially, several band members were considered for the lead, but upon hearing Terry perform it, the songwriter James Pankow's decision was unequivocal. Soon thereafter, they ventured into uncharted artistic territory. Chicago's renown steadily increased, ultimately leading them to Europe in 1970. Immediately, they witnessed firsthand the extent of their popularity in London, particularly during their performance at the Royal Albert Hall. During this event, each band member was individually introduced, receiving a standing ovation. Naturally, their domestic audience had not forgotten them. Upon their return from Europe, still basking in the glow of their international success, Chicago was astonished to experience another surge in popularity across America. This was largely attributable to a radio-edited version of their song "Make Me Smile," a modification that initially provoked outrage from the band, only for them to realize that this version had propelled their song into the top 10. Admittedly, a portion of this newfound fame did inflate Terry's ego. The band had not concluded their engagements in the United Kingdom. However, during their subsequent visit, they discovered a decline in their popularity. While their American fan base continued to expand, a significant portion of their European audience had shifted their allegiance to other artists, such as Eric Clapton. This shift resulted in a notably acrimonious outburst from Terry. During a press conference in London, he directed a volley of expletives at a journalist. However, it was not solely Terry's professional life that subjected him to moments of profound disappointment. The demanding lifestyle of a rock star can undoubtedly place a strain on romantic relationships, a reality that Terry would come to understand even more acutely throughout that decade. Previously, Terry had met Pamela Robinson, and the two initially formed a strong connection, culminating in their marriage in 1970. However, their relationship deteriorated over the subsequent 5 years, ultimately leading to a divorce. He would not remain solitary for long, however. The marriage between Terry and Pamela was, to say the least, unfulfilling, leaving him eager to move on after their separation. Fortunately for him, he found love once more with actress Camellia Ortiz, and the couple married in 1976. Furthermore, they welcomed their first and only child, Michelle, in the same year. Tragically, however, time was rapidly dwindling. By the close of the 70s, Chicago's internal dynamics were far from harmonious, and a significant shift was deemed imperative. While the band continued to enjoy considerable success, the behind-the-scenes relationships became increasingly fraught. The discord between Terry and certain bandmates was a persistent issue, exemplified by his friction with Peter Cetera, whose pervasive self-confidence had long irked Terry. Of course, Terry had his own personal battles to confront. Terry had embraced the rock star lifestyle with remarkable ease, which, unfortunately, meant he also adopted many of its attendant negative aspects. Compounding these issues, he appeared to possess a high tolerance for illicit substances, and even his bandmates observed his excessive consumption. This only exacerbated his existing challenges. Despite the band's triumphs and the accolades he received for his contributions, Terry's happiness diminished with each passing year. These sentiments were further intensified by his substance dependence, a reality he acknowledged when he confided in his bandmates, expressing his certainty that his addiction would prove fatal if he did not seek help. Nevertheless, his story was already approaching its conclusion. Notwithstanding certain interpersonal conflicts, Terry seemed to relish the company of his friends. For instance, on the fateful evening of January 22, 1978, he paid a visit to a percussionist who had joined Chicago earlier that decade. The two shared tea. Unbeknownst to the bandmates, this was to be the final evening before Terry's passing. Over the preceding years, Terry had undergone personal growth and broadened his interests beyond the realm of music. Yet this expansion may not have been entirely beneficial, as he developed a fascination with firearms and target practice, meaning he frequently carried a weapon. This was merely one element in a perilous confluence of factors. Terry showed no signs of slowing down. Following a party in Los Angeles on the night of January 23, 1978, he found himself at the residence of one of Chicago's associates, Don Johnson. They were the only two present. Beyond the revelry of the evening, Terry had already been consuming potent substances for several consecutive days. Consequently, his judgment was significantly impaired. As Terry and Johnson socialized after the party, the situation abruptly escalated into a dangerous scenario. When Terry retrieved his firearm, a 9mm pistol, he sat down and began cleaning it, which immediately put Johnson on edge. Recognizing Terry's altered state, Johnson emphatically cautioned the guitarist to exercise extreme care. Terry, however, remained remarkably calm. He was not in a mental state conducive to sound decision-making. Therefore, in response to Johnson's concerns and warnings, he quickly dismissed any notion of potential harm. Terry assured his host that there was no cause for alarm, stating, "Look, the clip is not even in it." Of course, he failed to consider all potential hazards. For better or worse, Terry was not one to be swayed by the opinions of others, a decision that proved to be a fatal error on this particular night. To demonstrate that there was no cause for concern, Terry showed Johnson the empty magazine in his hand before reinserting it into the 9mm and uttered his unforgettable final words. "What do you think I'm going to do? Blow my brains out?" Terry attempted to reassure Johnson, and after replacing the magazine, waved the 9mm around to emphasize his point. He was correct that the magazine was empty, but he failed to notice a single round still lodged in the chamber. In a tragic accident, the weapon discharged next to his head, bringing a premature end to Terry Kath's life. The aftermath was unspeakably devastating. Shocked and distraught, Don Johnson had witnessed the entire sequence of events leading to Terry's demise. Danny Seraphine, a founding member of Chicago, received the news while driving and immediately proceeded to his home, where he found Johnson inconsolable in a corner, weeping uncontrollably. Understandably, neither man was in any condition to offer assistance. Seraphine remained with Johnson until local authorities arrived at the grim scene. With the coroner present to ascertain the circumstances of Terry's final moments, as they examined the surroundings and the body, the coroner found it difficult to move it unaided, requesting Seraphine's assistance. However, the drummer was far too overcome with grief. This was not the only obstacle they encountered. As the horrific night unfolded, authorities gathered all necessary information and prepared to depart, intending to transport Terry's body. However, another impediment arose. He was simply too large. Terry was not only too heavy for the coroner to lift alone, but also too tall to fit into the standard body bag. Consequently, his snakeskin boots protruded from the end as his remains were transported. Naturally, the public became a hotbed of speculation. Immediately upon the news of Terry's passing circulating, both the press and the general public began to question the nature of the incident and whether it had been intentional. While it was true that Terry had been experiencing a difficult period in his life, his bandmates maintained that it was purely an accident, corroborating Don Johnson's account. Suddenly, the band began to reevaluate their priorities. Terry had been an indispensable component of Chicago, both in terms of his talent and his leadership. His passing had genuinely placed the band's future in jeopardy. Not to mention that beyond the question of how Chicago could succeed without him, its members were still grappling with their grief. However, at the encouragement of musical director Doc Severinsen, they resolved not to disband. While Terry was so integral, the rest of the band felt that many had not recognized his profound importance. Terry was the driving force behind much of Chicago's success. But as the band viewed itself as more of a collaborative collective, his individual contributions were somewhat overlooked. Fortunately, those closest to him continued to hold him in the highest esteem. Still mourning the loss of their friend and bandmate, Chicago decided to continue their musical endeavors and released their first album, Without Terry, Hot Streets, in October 1978 as a tribute to their late guitarist and a marker of the band's renewed path. The album included the track Alive Again, and they later released another song, Feel the Spirit, in his memory. This new album was not without a guitarist, however. While no one could ever truly replicate Terry's impact on the band, Chicago still needed to find a replacement for their vacant guitarist position. This was not a simple decision, as over 30 individuals auditioned to become their newest member. Ultimately, they selected Donnie Dacus, a former guitarist for Crosby, Stills, and Nash. Regarding Terry's immediate family, they, too, wished for the world to remember him. Fast-forwarding a couple of decades to 2012, a renewed effort was made to bring Terry's life and contributions to the forefront, spearheaded by his own family. His daughter Michelle envisioned producing a documentary titled Searching for Terry, Discovering a Guitar Legend, and she announced that the project had secured sufficient funding that year. Through this endeavor, audiences would gain insight into the impact he left on the music industry. The documentary was in production over the following years, during which Michelle interviewed not only the members of Chicago, but also numerous other renowned guitarists. Renamed the Terry Kath Experience, it premiered at the Toronto International Film Festival in 2016, where audiences witnessed musicians such as Mike Campbell and Joe Walsh offering effusive applause for Terry's virtuosity. During this period, Michelle also managed to resolve a long-standing mystery. Throughout Terry's career, an unfortunate occurrence became increasingly common. Many of his guitars went missing. For an extended period, his bandmates and family suspected theft. However, while researching for the documentary, Michelle surprisingly discovered several of them at her step-grandmother's residence, including his prized Telecaster. Even if the public had largely overlooked Terry during his tenure with Chicago, he remained a monumental figure in the music world, and the documentary undoubtedly introduced his story to a wider audience. Consequently, in acknowledgement of his and the band's significant impact, Chicago was inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame on April 8, 2016. When the time arrived for the members to receive their awards, Michelle stepped forward and accepted Terry's on his behalf.